Good evening, everybody. Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rowena Taylor. I work in operations here at the International School of Intuition and Healing. And welcome to our first masterclass of the year. We're so super excited to dive into the mysteries of 2025 and mapping out your stars with the amazing Margarita Celeste. Margarita is a professional astrologer based here in Cape Town, South Africa. And she's also the course creator and tutor for the astrology courses that the school offers and has been a part of the school for a number of years. I'm going to hand you over to Margarita in a minute to tell you a bit more about herself. But before I do, just some general housekeeping. If everyone can please keep themselves on mute. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat box, and we'll do a little bit of a Q&A session at the end. So over to you, Margarita.
Thank you so much, Irene. Hi, everybody. I will admit this has got my palms sweating a little bit. It's just quite a big number of humans. So welcome and thanks for giving up your Thursday evening to be in this little chat. Yeah, my name's Margarita. Thank you for that introduction. There's a lot of you that I know, that I have taught, that have been my students and my clients. And there's a whole bunch of you that I don't know. So for those of you who don't know me or haven't heard about me, obviously I've been working with the school for quite a while. I always give the little synopsis of myself that astrology has been in my life my whole life. But I remember it specifically as a teenager, being interested in Linda Goodman. I'm sure there's quite a few of you who know that author. And that was kind of what I call my gateway drug into astrology. And from that point, I was always kind of curious and interested in all things esoteric. And I would say about 15 years ago, I began really, really studying and getting my feet into astrology and studied with Rod Suskin, did the 3-year diploma course, got a distinction, graduated, and took my practice overseas. And that's where it started, actually in Bali. So now I'm living kind of a swallow life, half in Cape Town, or a little bit more than half in Cape Town. And then the other half of the year I spend traveling and teaching and doing retreats. I do readings, I teach courses, I write a lot of content as well. I do a lot of workshops. I literally wake up in the morning and 7 hours of my day is dedicated to astrology. So it's a language. I speak it kind of okay. I think it's something that we continue learning forever and ever. So for tonight's talk, we have more or less an hour together. This is a talk that I give at the end of every year and the beginning of every new year. So I've just spent a couple of weeks in the Garden Route giving this talk at quite a few events and just honing it and honing it and honing it, and also kind of observing what's been unfolding, because that kind of deepens my lectures. So really just relax, sit back. Hopefully you've got a cup of tea. And yeah, hopefully I keep you engaged and entertained for the full hour. There's a lot of material to go through. I do speak very fast. My students know this, but I do try and keep it as concise and simple as possible. So I feel like there's probably a lot of people in here who are very astrology savvy. And maybe there are some of you that are beginners. So again, I'll try and find a middle ground for all of you. But very, very importantly, before I dive into all the different things that are going to be unfolding in 2025 and beyond, something I always like to just kind of prep my lectures with is that taking the approach of astrology is a language. It's the language of the planets. It's a language of the sky. And if we learn this language, we learn the language of the divine. Okay, so it's like a cosmic clock. It reflects the energy rather than causes the energy. Okay, so when you see a clock on the wall and it's 7 o'clock, it's not the clock that's making it 7 o'clock, it's just reflecting the time. And so that's how we approach astrology. It is a reflection of as above, so below. So these energies can help us find our way through challenging times, make the most of the best times, prepare us for what's coming so that we can kind of plan ahead. So I'm sure there's plenty of planners in this room. And it helps us to flow with things rather than struggle upstream. So that's kind of the intention that I want to put in tonight's lecture is not to freak anyone out or not to make you worry, because I know a lot of people also with astrology I have found that a lot of neurotic people are drawn to astrology, including myself. It was a reason why I got interested in astrology. Is like, well, if I know what's happening in the future, I can control it. So that might be for a lot of us the reason why we're coming in here, or we might have a different intention entirely. My intention for you is to prepare you and to guide you and to let you know what the energies are, what's unfolding. I find what's very interesting about 2025 is most of you might already know there are 10 planets that we use in astrology. Five of those planets we use to make predictions. Now, prediction is a very scary word for a lot of people. They don't like it. So the way that I like to explain it, it's like predicting the weather. It's looking at a forecast, looking at a theme and saying, look, there's a chance of rain. If you want, you can go get an umbrella, or you can dance in the rain, or you can catch the whatever you want to do. So it can indicate things that are unfolding, and then you have the free will to kind of choose how to respond to that. And there are a lot of variables. Bearing in mind that this talk is a very generalized talk, I'm going to try and include bits and pieces for every sign. If I leave you out, we can always ask at the end. But for a real deep dive into what's happening in your own life, in your own chart, you obviously need to have a reading, or you need to be quite good at astrology to the point that you can kind of read your own chart. So just putting that little disclaimer in there. But I will do my best. So 5 of the planets we use for predictive work. Because they move more slowly, right? The other 5 move so quickly that if we had to do predictive work with that, it would make us all a little bit crazy. Out of those 5 planets, 4 are changing signs this year. And that's kind of unusual. It doesn't happen all the time. So we're gonna go into which of those planets are changing signs. We're gonna talk about what they mean. A useful way to think of planets is as archetypes, as symbols of a particular thing. So the very first thing I'm going to leap in is talking about what's happening right now in this moment and what's kind of been going on since about December last year and a little bit before. We're in something called a Mars retrograde phase. So for those of you who don't know what retrograde is, or maybe you've heard of Mercury retrograde, usually I crowdsource this, but time is limited and there's so many of us. I like to be more interactive, but for now, you're just going to have to listen to me lecture. Retrograde is when a planet slows down in its orbit and appears to go backwards. So we on Earth, we're at a normal speed, right? And when a planet slows down, it's like being in a car. We look at it and it slows down, and it slows down and we look at it and it looks as if it's going backwards, right? It's not necessarily going backwards, but it's giving that optical illusion. It's very similar with retrograde planets. Now, what this means, because astrology is a symbolic language, right? It means that whatever that planet represents becomes slow, becomes maybe problematic. It can bring up the shadow of that planet. I work a lot with Jungian terminology, Carl Jung. It can bring all this re-energy, reflect, renew, restructure, review. For those of you who've heard of Mercury retrograde, Mercury represents the mind and the intellect and travel and communication. So when Mercury goes retrograde, all those things kind of go a little bit slower or become more frustrating. It's an invitation from the universe to just press the pause button and not make decisions right now. It happens quite a few times a year, though, so a lot of people are always feeling like Mercury's in retrograde. And I view retrogrades as periods, opportunities from the universe. A lot of people have maybe a negative view of retrogrades. And yes, it can be frustrating because we are conditioned as a society to keep moving really fast all the time. Forward motion, progression, never stop, linear, which can actually be quite exhausting if we don't take these very much needed pauses and breaks to reflect and renew what's going on in my life. Is this actually still working for me? But we have resistance to that, especially in our culture. So currently we have this Mars retrograde phase, which is officially the 6th of December until the 23rd of February. So that's when the actual retrograde motion is happening. But I give it a bit of padding, like a month on each side, because we feel the energies kind of build already. Now, Mars is, as you all probably know, the god of war, right? So that's his archetype. Now, Most of us are very fortunate enough not to have to engage in war, but we do go to work, right? So work has kind of replaced war. And I'll unpack that a little bit because it's where our energy goes. We all have the planet Mars in our own birth charts. We all have all 10 planets in our own birth charts. So we all have this Mars energy. It's not bad. We all go and we have this drive and we have this want to do things and go and action and energy. That's all Mars vibes, right? God of war, action, conflict, assertiveness, work, energy. So we can imagine when Mars is retrograde, when the god of war is retrograde, the god of work is retrograde, whatever he symbolizes can become shadowy, pronounced, more difficult, more challenging. And on a very practical level, without even talking about the sign that he's retrograde in at the moment, because Mars is our drive and energy, a lot of us can feel on the go slow at the moment. There's actually difficulty summoning up the physical energy and the physical motivation and even the enthusiasm for the things that we usually might enjoy. Why is this happening? Because we need to pause. We need to actually review and relook at what we put our energy into, whether that's work or a passion or a project or whatever it is, even a relationship, and ask ourselves, is this actually working? And if not, now might not be the time to take action or make decisions because it's Mars is retrograde. But after the retrograde, we can begin moving. So what I've seen a lot of during this retrograde is very low energy, low libido, low motivation, low enthusiasm, more conflict because we're feeling a bit frustrated because we're not moving at the speed that we would usually like. And this is very pertinent to those of you who are Aries and Scorpio. If you have an Aries or Scorpio sun, or if you have an Aries or Scorpio rising sign, if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Knowing your sun sign's more than enough. You're going to feel this more viscerally because Mars is your ruling planet. So when your ruling planet goes into retrograde, it's going to affect you more. Aries and Scorpio people really do like to charge ahead, especially Aries. They don't like waiting. They don't like having to pause. So for you, it might be particularly challenging to wait for your ruler to resume motion. But it is very valuable. It's valuable time to really look at your life. And also with work, I'm seeing a lot of work changes and even work uncertainties at this time, or short contracts, simply because of this retrograde motion. We're going back to old projects, maybe old employments. There's a lot of people that I'm seeing that are going back to even old relationships and partnerships because there's something to be tied up there. So it's very good to go back to the old things and have this closure, because once Mars goes direct, all systems go. It's also affecting Cancerians. So if you have a Cancer sun or rising, the reason for this is because Mars is retrograde in the sign of Cancer, also Leos. So he's retrograding across 2 signs because he's going backwards. So you'll be feeling this especially in terms of your physical energy and maybe even your relationships. On the collective, Mars is not that happy in Cancer. I call it the cosmic crybaby. So there's this kind of it's the warrior planet in the sign of the home and the mother and the nurturer. The last thing a warrior wants to do is be in the kitchen making food. They want to be out on the battlefield. So Mars in Cancer is like, what am I doing here? This is frustrating. What I'm seeing it manifest as is though in situations where we've been over-giving and over-nurturing and we haven't actually asked for what we need, and then we're getting passive-aggressive and resentful. And that's actually on us. That's our own responsibility. We need to learn how to assert ourselves in a healthy way so that we get our needs met and we're not over-mothering. Right? It's also about the inner child. It's really listening to that inner child and putting our hands on our heart and saying, look, what do you need right now? How do you need to express yourself? It's about translating our passions, which is the Leo energy, into some sort of purpose. And it's about processing that before we actually go ahead. So the one thing I'll leave you with in terms of the Mars retrograde is that feelings are not facts, right? So feelings are valid and they are real, and we have reasons for those feelings. but they might be very subjective during this time. So reacting to our big feelings might cause more harm than help. So self-soothing, very important during this time. I've recently been on a retreat where I was taught the most amazing emotional tools, just punching a pillow, screaming into a pillow, playing some loud music and dancing. These are all really great ways to get our nervous system back online without harming anything around us during Mars retrograde. So it can be very healthy to learn emotional management tools over this time. So then this month, we also have the move of the moon's nodes into a new pair of signs. So without going into too much detail, what the nodes symbolize are these karmic points, these cosmic lessons. Now, we all have the nodes somewhere in our own charts, but this is on a collective level. So for the last 18 months, the nodes have been in Aries and Libra. And when I looked at this, when it was about to move, the words that came to my mind were war, Aries, and peace, Libra. And our first eclipse in these signs was in October 2023, which is when we had the bombings in Israel. So that was how it is kind of manifesting in the collective. And in the personal, what I noticed what was going on is war and peace within our relationships. Aries and Libra is the axis of relationships. So in the last 18 months, I personally have seen enormous shifts in relating, whether it's romance or business partnership or friendship. What seems to have been happening, because the South Node was in Libra and the North Node in Aries, was we were recognizing where we were draining energy, the Libra kind of people pleasing, over compromising, not speaking up for ourselves. And then there was almost like an overemphasis on the Aries, me, my sovereignty, my leadership. I refuse to compromise. What can often happen with the nodes is that we bounce between the two extremes before we come to a happy medium. And so what I did see in relationships that were unbalanced, of give and take, of you and me, there was often a breaking apart. And often there was a search, or there was an emphasis on finding myself, my sovereign leadership. And then coming back to, well, wait, I actually would like to have a partner, or I'd like someone to be on my team, and I will compromise to a certain degree. So it has kind of started correcting itself. And now we're kind of moving out of this relationship, this very personal constellation, into the Pisces and Virgo axis. So the nodes are shifting into Pisces and Virgo. So for those who have strong Aries and Libra signatures in your charts, your sun or rising, this probably would have affected your relationships the most out of most people. And so the Pisces and Virgo amongst us, the sun or rising in Pisces or Virgo, it's our turn. I've got a Pisces rising, so I know this is kind of moving into my chart, and it's also potentially going to bring quite a big, even though Pisces and Virgo is not about relationships necessarily, it's going to bring quite an emphasis on our relationships. So for those of you who have Pisces rising or Virgo rising or sun or moon, the nodes are really going to start affecting you, and you might find yourself being propelled into certain directions or relationships that feel very karmic, almost like fated to a certain degree. So the nodes, because they're linked to eclipses, and the eclipses this year are going to happen in March and September, eclipses are very, very powerful cosmic events. And they tend to accelerate us on a path that we might not consciously feel like we've chosen, but we have on some level chosen it. So Pisces and Virgo, that's kind of like, get ready, strap yourself in, 18 months of it's your turn. And this can come down to relationships, it can come down to career, life path, it's life really, in a very broad sense. The collective for the rest of us, this for me, the two words that come to mind with Pisces and Virgo is healing and service. So we're going beyond the personal and we're going into almost like the transpersonal. It's not so much about us and me and you anymore. It's about something bigger. And I love to use a story from the Bible that really illustrates the two almost like same, but different Pisces Virgo energies. So the story goes, or the fable goes, that Jesus came to town and he was going to visit Mary and Martha, who were sisters. And Mary got super excited, and Martha got really nervous. So Martha goes off in Virgo style to the kitchen and starts planning everything that they're going to eat and starts cleaning the house and making sure that everything is in order, which is a very Virgo thing to do. While Mary was just like, I'm going to just have this bowl of foot washing water and I'm going to sit at his feet and I'm just going to be in this devotion, you know, this absolute devotion and surrender. Like, who cares about it? We'll find food. Don't worry about it. And there was conflict between Mary and Martha because Martha's like, well, like the house. And Mary's like, but look at this opportunity. Come and sit here. Come and listen to, be devoted to this truth. And for me, that's very much the Pisces Virgo feel that we're going into. There's going to be a lot of emphasis because the North Node is going to be in Pisces. The North Node is a very expansive energy. It expands the energy of the sign that it's in, and the South Node in Virgo, which almost is a decreasing energy. In Vedic astrology, they're known as the dragon's head, Rahu, and the dragon's tail, Ketu. So there's this draining, it's almost like the South Node is a bit like Saturn, where it's restricting and constrictive, and the North Node is like Jupiter, where it's like hungry and expansive. And both can go to extremes. They've got a very extreme connotation, the nodes. So there might be this extreme focus on Pisces, which is like devotion and service and surrender and non-practicality. And then there can be almost like not enough, maybe, focus on the Virgo planning, structure, organization. At the same time, we're probably going to start seeing more and more any past patterns that link to over controlling, which is Virgo, over perfecting, seeking for flaws, seeking to fix everything, not accepting things, over judging, right? That's the shadow of Virgo. Instead of the Piscean acceptance, unconditional love. When we bring these two signs into cohesion, into harmony, we have a beautiful balance of discernment, which is the Virgo energy. We have to be discerning, and almost like acceptance, which is Pisces. Because Pisces, to emphasize, has no boundaries, is not discerning. Everything is accepting. Yes, I know this is the 6th time that he's moved back into the house and he's not paying rent and he's bringing his whole family, but shame. You know, that's the kind of Pisces thing. It's like over rescuing or over victimized. Where the Virgo is like, well, actually, we need some boundaries here. We need some order. Can we just bang out a spreadsheet for this, or just say no? Actually, so there's going to be a bit of emphasis on that. And then on a greater level, I think it's going to bring into balance the healing energy, which is Pisces is very energetic and spiritual. Virgo is very practical. It's like your nutrition and your yoga and your smoothies, your green juices, your integrative doctors. Pisces is like the life alignment practitioner, the intuitive healer, the energy reader. And so we can start seeing a bit more of the balance, but there's going to be a swing between the two before we find that balance. Okay, then the third thing, we've got 8 things on our agenda. So I'm going to try and get through these as fast as I can. The third thing is Venus is going retrograde between March and April. Now, Venus only goes retrograde every 18 months. She's obviously the archetype of love. She's the goddess of beauty and love and pleasure and money and resources and values. Also, very valuable time to pause and really reflect on our relationships, all of our relationships, love relationships, romance, friendship, to reflect on our values as well, our value system. Is this still important to me? Is this person still important to me? Is the situation still important to me? What's interesting is that she's going to retrograde in 2 signs, Aries and Pisces. So it is going to affect Aries and Pisces, but also it will affect those who are ruled by Venus, which is Taurus and Libra. So those are the 4 signs it's mainly going to affect. I always caution with Venus retrograde. You know, they always say that Mercury retrograde brings the exes back from the dead. And yes, it does. You sometimes get that text of like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from them in 10 years. Like, why? But Venus retrograde, because it's particularly to do with relationships, is like the ex-queen. So I usually say if there's closure that you need, if you need to go over something, go for it. If a new relationship starts under Venus's retrograde, maybe don't call it anything until she's gone direct. So that will be around the end of April. because it can be a little bit tricky. Our relationships, even our finances, so she is retrograding first in Aries, which is a very impulsive energy. Venus retrograde in Aries can like press that buy now button way too quickly. It can also be in shadow because whenever a planet's retrograde, it brings up some shadow. It can also veer into self-absorption, right? Look at me, it's all about me. And then she slips back into Pisces. So it's almost like we go from potential self-absorption to complete self-sacrifice. Take everything, it's all yours. I don't need anything. I'll bend over backwards. You are perfect. Both Aries and Pisces can be very idealistic and very fantasy. The hero on the horse and the maiden and the castle and the tower and all those very classic fairy tales. So we need to be very careful of getting pulled into those fairy tales and remain feet on the ground and be very careful of those patterns of either putting too much emphasis on me, or not enough emphasis, you don't even exist. I live to serve, I live to devote myself. Again, a very, very valuable time for relationships because relationships can go through a beautiful rebirth at this point, where you both, or however many there are of you, really review what's important to all of you. And you find a new way, you find a different way forward. And just to interject, I am running a relationship astrology course during that time, so it might be a very good thing to do while you may potentially be navigating a Venus retrograde. So now we move to the ingresses. We haven't even gone to the 4 planets changing signs. So the first 2 that I'm actually going to talk about almost simultaneously is Neptune and Saturn. These are 2 very different archetypes. Saturn is, for me, the tough love teacher, very structured, disciplined, responsible, authoritative, reality, career. Like it's like the adult of the zodiac, of the planetary sort of constellation. And then Neptune is kind of like this Poseidon energy, the mystic archetype. So Neptune's very nebulous. My favorite word with Neptune is delulu, which means delusional. I love it. I use it all the time now. And Neptune is like very foggy and misty and kind of uncertain and magical and musical and like who cares about responsibility? Let's just drift in the realm of nothingness and the void and the music. So these 2 planets have actually been moving together in Pisces for the last 3 years. And actually, they've made quite a good team, even though they're so different. The reason for this is because Neptune entered Pisces back in more or less 2011, at which time I began, this is always a joke that I make, it's not funny, but it's my ministry, my teaching. And at that time, there were maybe like 2 people that were kind of even interested in esoteric things. Like the world hadn't really gone to that place yet. Then came 2012, and there was like this massive awakening. And so Neptune and Pisces, because these 2 signs, this planet and the sun work well together, kind of like brought us all into this deeper spiritual journey. But at the same time, there's been a lot of lack of discernment. Remember, with Pisces, the shadow can be, I'm not discerning, there's no boundary, what does this mean? Everybody's welcome, come into my energy. Now I'm overwhelmed. Now I've got to go and isolate for a year because, you know. So Saturn came along 3 years ago, 2023, March 2023, and said, well, hang on, like, whoa, Neptune, like you have just been letting everything and everyone in for the last couple of years. Can we just have some order? So I feel like they can make a very good team when we work with them very actively. So in the last 3 years, I think Saturn has brought a lot of discernment and structure to things that needed structure, even things like plant journeys and spiritual festivals and spiritual courses, like the School of Intuition is a very good example, our school, of really structuring these concepts and offering them in a more responsible way so that we're not just like studying and learning and taking everything in that we can. We've also, over the last 3 years, learned to take more responsibility for our addictions, for our toxicity. We've learned to put in boundaries. We've learned to be vulnerable in a way that isn't completely laying ourselves bare to the whole world. So it's kind of like, I always think about it as clean up in aisle 5. That's what Saturn's been doing with Neptune the last couple of years. And so as these two make their way into, from the last sign of the zodiac, which is the Pisces, into the first sign of the zodiac, which is Aries, it's quite a dramatic shift. But both going to be dancing back and forth between these two signs before they both settle fully into Aries at the start of 2026. So we're going to see over the course of this year, this kind of like back and forth dance. And often when planets are doing this back and forth dance, we saw it with Pluto and Capricorn. When planets are at the 29th degree of any sign, it's a very, very critical degree. There's an urgency. There's a call to wrap things up. There's a call to end our spiritual journey. So we might find that for a lot of us, we come to the end of a very deep, deep journey. And once Saturn and Neptune step into Aries, there's like this really profound new chapter that kicks in. That's less about the drifty collective and everybody else, but more about me, my path, my identity. Where am I going? It's a very sovereign energy. It's a very leadership-orientated energy. Of course, Saturn and Neptune are going to be still affecting those that have very strong Pisces and Virgo placements the most. And that means your sun, your moon, or your rising. And on a secondary level, your Sagittarians and your Geminis who may have been feeling quite, not burdened is the right word, maybe, but lost, but also very matured by this energy, right? So it's our time to slowly hand the baton over to the Aries and the Libras of the world, especially Aries, those with strong Aries signatures in the chart. You're really going to get this dose of Saturn and Neptune. It can be very, very powerful beginnings for you, but the key ingredient with the combination of these two planets is almost to the visual that I love using is the Neptune is this balloon. It's so beautiful. It's gold and glitter and fairies and butterflies. And the Saturn is the string and the rock that we tie to the string in order to keep that balloon tethered to the ground. Because if we didn't keep that balloon tethered, that Neptune vision and dream, it would just drift off into the atmosphere. Nothing would happen. So when we actively work with these energies to bring our visions to concrete reality, it can be very beneficial. But it can sometimes be a bit tricky because Neptune can often wear away at the foundations that Saturn tries to create. And maybe we've also been finding that the last 3 years, we attempting these foundations, but the foundations that are not meant for us, let's say if we've been building castles on the sand, those foundations are crumbling away, which can leave some of us feeling a bit despondent, like, well, I tried to build this, and like, why is it not lasting? Because the foundations are not strong enough. So for these next 3 years, while Saturn and Neptune continue their co-journey together, we need to make very sure that the foundations that we're building, especially for any new chapters that we have got going on, especially in relation to our identity and the development of our identity, are very strong. The groundwork has to be perfect because otherwise that Neptune is just going to dissolve all those structures of Saturn. So it's very much about us. And what I'm seeing with these ingresses is that we're also moving from almost like quite a feminine energy because a lot of these planets have been in feminine signs. It doesn't mean female necessarily. It means more receptive, into masculine signs, which means more active and more out in the world. So there's a bit more action that we're going to begin to see. Yeah, so I really feel like there's going to be a lot of emphasis on personal identity, personal path. But the two things I would say is very important is be very on the collective, being very aware, especially with Neptune and Aries, of false leaders. Okay, so people, and this can be on the like world stage, or it can be literally on our Instagram feed. So those who may portray themselves as like this guru or like this master or this mistress or this like hero, heroine, or whatever it is, being very careful to do our research and our due diligence before we fall into that spell. And it's the same for us. Constructing our identities in an authentic way lends us credibility, whether we're at work or in our personal lives. So being very mindful of false gurus in a way. Yeah. I think that's quite an important one to be aware of, especially because I'm jumping to the eighth thing that I was going to share, especially because we have Pluto in Aquarius, which is all the AI and all the technology and all this like magic. That's kind of, but there's a term for it called deep fake. So really, really trying to avoid the deep fake, whether it's in ourselves or within the collective, remembering that we are not gods. And giving power over to technology or to certain leaders is also saying, well, okay, you're a god. So being very, very careful of that. It's a time of activation. It's activating new things, new chapters, a new path. So very much affecting Aries, very much affecting Libras as well at some points, especially in the next 3 years. So Saturn spends about 2 to 3 years in every sign. So Saturn's going to make a big connection to you guys. Neptune, as maybe you've already worked out, spends up to 15 years in a sign. So that's kind of how long these transits are going to last. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be continual, the experiences for you. It's going to happen like at some point for about 10 months, where one or both of these planets is going to personally affect you. Probably mostly in the realm of relationship. It can also be life path. It can be health. It really depends on where it falls in your chart. It can be big responsibilities, commitments that are faced, that are put upon you, that you have to rise up to the challenge and take on that baton that Pisces and Virgo and Sag and Gemini have been doing the last couple of years, and it's your turn to grow and actually to mature. And sometimes that will be through restriction or duty or responsibility or feeling maybe a little bit lost and like, is this me? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And through that experience, the Neptune energy leads us to learn to trust and to go with the flow and to really tune into the universe. But Saturn says, do the work. So it's a little bit of both. Doing the work, it's that saying that I love, trusting God, but lock your car. And that's a very good Saturn-Neptune summary, in a way. Always have to take a breath at some point. Okay. So we have 3 more changes. Well, 2 more changes and one that's still quite a strong impact on us. Talking about Jupiter. So Jupiter is going to be moving into the sign of Cancer in June. It's going to last for about a year. He's been in Gemini for the last year. So for those of you who have Gemini in your charts, Jupiter is the archetype of abundance and of growth. He's the lucky charm, the teacher, the traveler. He's expansive. He's in direct opposition to Saturn, who's more contracting. Jupiter's kind of like, let's open our arms. Now, every planet has a sign that it enjoys and signs that it's maybe not as comfortable in. So Jupiter in Gemini is not that comfortable. The reason why is because Gemini is, those of you who have Gemini in your charts, is all about the little details, right? Always logistics, details, the fine prints. Lots of things going on, constantly curious. Jupiter energy is about the bigger picture. It doesn't want to have anything to do with the details. So what is, I think, collectively been the case is Jupiter in Gemini has been very exciting because there's been so much to do and there's so much to learn and there's so many activities and so much change. It's like the octopus with many arms. But I have found it to be quite overwhelming, where there's information overload, where there's so many tasks on the boil that we can't like finish everything actually. So that's the Jupiter in Gemini, but it also has expanded our networking. I've seen a lot of people traveling much more in the last year with the Jupiter in Gemini, because Gemini also rules short trips and trips to like nearby places. So it's expanded that energy. For those who have Gemini in their charts, Moon, Sun, or Rising, this has been probably quite a particularly growth-provoking phase for you. Maybe quite a feel-good phase, but possibly also excess. On a secondary level, it's also affected Sagittarius, and on a lower level, the Pisces and the Virgo, but not as much as Gemini and Sag. From June, Jupiter goes into Cancer, which it's a sign that he loves. He's what's known as exalted in Cancer. So for those of you who have a strong Cancer signature in your charts, moon, sun, or rising, this can be a very, very positive time for you. A lot of personal growth. It can be good for your home situation, your family situation. It can give you opportunities to expand in all kinds of directions. It can be good for your relationships. Even if things end or there's what looks on the outside like a challenging situation, Jupiter's energy is like, you know what, this is benign. This is a good ending. This is a good situation. It's actually going to benefit you. So Cancers, it's a very nice time for you. On a secondary level, it's also good for the other water signs, Scorpio and Pisces, because Jupiter's going to cast some good aspects to you. And what's also going to happen, I think, is currently Mars is retrograde in Cancer, and that's all the painful feels and the hurt in a child and the wounding. And Jupiter in Cancer from June is almost going to, like a mother, like a loving mother, is going to come and take you in his arms, in her arms, and soothe you. Everything's going to feel so much better. All those wounds that may be coming up for you right now, all those emotional things, are going to be kind of like your tears wiped away with the Jupiter in Cancer. It's a deeply nurturing energy with a beautiful emphasis on home and family and connection and emotions. So that's really something lovely to look forward to, and that will last for about a year, June until June 2026. Our last ingress is Uranus moving into Gemini from Taurus. This is a great move because Uranian energy enjoys Gemini energy. They fit together, they work together. Uranus in Taurus is tricky. So Uranus spends about 7 or 8 years in each sign. Okay, so for the last 7 or 8 years, since I think about 2018, Taurians, if you've got your moon, sun, or rising in Taurus, it's probably been a lot of upheaval for you at some point during this transit. And Taurus is the one sign that really doesn't like change. Unless you have other things in your chart, lots of Gemini, for example, that say, yeah, I'm cool with change. But generally speaking, Taurians like to go to the same restaurant every Friday because it's their favorite food, and Saturday go to the hairdresser because it's their favorite hairdresser. Like, they like things to be quite predictable, and it's comforting. So the Uranus in Taurus period has been very disruptive for stability. The gift of Uranus, because it's, for me, the revolutionary. It's the archetype of the revolutionary, the rebel, the awakener. I'm very biased towards Uranus because I'm an Aquarius, and in modern astrology, Uranus rules Aquarius, so I'm all Uranian. But I also acknowledge that the stable things that Taurus rules, relationships, home, your physical home, your finances, that's Taurian. Food, agriculture, has been in a state of immense flux. The gift of Uranus is freedom. So what I've seen this translate as is freedom from, for a lot of people, from the usual financial structures, so cryptocurrency, basically, or the rise of cryptocurrency, which I expect, I'm not a financial astrologer, but I expect to start stabilizing once Uranus leaves Taurus for good. So he's going to spend a few months in Gemini from July until, I think, November, and then he's going to go back into Taurus, and then 2026 he's like back in Gemini. So there's a bit of back and forth. Again, just like wrapping up loose ends. But yeah, I've seen a lot of on the physical manifestation in the last 8 years, digital nomads. So Taurus rules home, your physical space. Uranus rules freedom. So I've seen a lot of people just like give up their homes and like live in literally like a caravan, or like not actually have a stable address. I've seen Uranus disrupt relationships in the way that there's been a lot more emphasis on open relating, on new relationship frameworks, on E&M. That's been a definite thing. Finances as well. Agriculture, the way we eat food, there's been a bit of a revolution there as well. I think people have started to realize, like, this is so carcinogenic. We need to free ourselves from the system. So for those who are Taurus, it's almost over, but it's also set you free, and given you wings, and that's the gift of Uranus, and given you a sense of authenticity, because Uranus is like fly their freak flag as high as possible. They don't care about what society thinks. They are who they are. And that's the gift of Uranian energy, for especially for the Taurians. Also on a secondary level, Scorpios. So some point in the last 8 years, for about a year, maybe 2, you may have been very affected by this Uranian energy, very much in your relationships, because that's where Uranus would have been going through. So setting you free in that area, but also reflecting, not creating, reflecting turbulence. And on a third level is the Aquarians and the Leos. So Uranian energy has also been affecting those 2 signs at some point. So also something unpredictable, because that's Uranian energy, sudden life change, sudden freedom, breaking free. That's all Uranian energy at play. So we're almost at the end, and Uranus will go into Gemini. So for those of you who are saying bye to Jupiter, you're going to say hi to Uranus. And at some point in the next 8 years, Uranus is really going to come into play into your life. And luckily for Geminis, you love change, you love variety, you live for curiosity. Again, unless you have very fixed planets in your chart, so you have to know your whole chart. But on a very general sense, this could be very exciting for you. But do expect the unexpected. Okay, it's your turn. It will also affect Sagittarians at some point, who also are like, yay, more change, whoop, whoop, can't wait. And then Virgos and Pisces on a third level. So at some point in those next few years. On the collective, the last time that Uranus was in Gemini is actually a very interesting time in history. Aviation was kind of created, or like invented, I guess. Morse code, different ways of communicating and languages. So we'll see a revolution in how we communicate. I'm interested to see where technology goes, because Uranus is going to be working very closely with Pluto and Aquarius. So we're going to see some really wild changes. I think also innovation, because that's what Uranus is all about. Innovation to education, to traveling, to the way we socialize, our networks, our families. Working with Pluto in Aquarius, the danger here is becoming too reliant on technology. You know, I started listening to this really interesting podcast, and I need to listen to it more. But it's like many years ago, we dreamed of having the world's knowledge at our fingertips, right? I don't know if anybody ever had that dream. It was just me, because I'm an Aquarius. But imagine if I could download all the knowledge into my brain right now. We can do that now. We've got ChatGPT. We can look for anything that we want like this. It's a magician. But magicians can be, there's no emotion attached there. There's no empathy. There's no human. And so we need to be very careful in these next decades to retain our humanity. Because giving our power over to technology and to innovation can be very destructive to the human spirit, to the spirit. And that's why I'm very happy to see the nodes going into Pisces and Virgo, which is spiritual energy, and Jupiter into Cancer. It brings that beautiful empathy that I think we're going to need. Especially with Pluto, which is the final thing that I'm going to mention, being in Aquarius. So he's been in Aquarius. He was affecting Capricorn for almost 20 years, from 2008 until pretty much this time last year. So for those of you who are Capricorn in your charts, also Cancer, Libra, Aries, at some point in those 15 years, you went into a journey of the underworld, which is Pluto energy, Hades, Persephone, Kali, death and rebirth experiences. And you came out empowered, and you came out changed, and you came out transformed, but it's not easy making that journey into the underworld, right? So now in Aquarius, on the collective, it's very much about not giving that power over to technology. It's about revolutionizing technology. It's about revolutionizing community as well, because Aquarius rules that concept of community, education as well. It might crumble society to a certain degree over these next 20 years, because that's how long Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, but it will rebirth it, because that's always what happened. What we saw in Capricorn is it collapsed the economic system. That's Capricorn, the governments, the authority, the traditions, work, economy, things like that. And it kind of started recreating that and we're still integrating it. And Pluto in Aquarius is also about the collapse of the community and the recreation of that. It's potentially giving power back to the people. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius is about 250 years ago. We saw a lot of revolutions in the world. So I think we're going to see a lot of that, and maybe on our personal level as well. So for those of us who have Aquarius in our charts, at some point in these next 20 years, for maybe a year or two, we're going to go through the underworld. I've got 3 planets in Aquarius, so I'm with you guys. And we're going to go and get that treasure from the shadow. We're going to be transformed. To a secondary degree, it will affect Leos, and then to a third, it will be Taurus and Scorpio. So, yeah, I think I like working with Pluto energy. It can be very deep and very powerful, and it's kind of shamanic in a way. So for those of us with those signs in our charts, we're in for a little bit of a shamanic journey. So yeah, that kind of brings me close to the end of my talk. Just to recap, we've got the Mars retrograde till February, got the nodes moving into Pisces and Virgo in January for 18 months. We've got Venus retrograde March and April. We've got Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries for most of the year. And in Pisces, got Jupiter moving into Cancer in June, Uranus into Gemini in July until November. And then Pluto is sitting in Aquarius, not moving. Well, I mean, moving in Aquarius, but he's not changing signs. So I think we got to our 1 hour mark. That was the challenge set to me by the school. I hope I've kept you all engaged. Looks like you're all still here, which is great. And I'm ready to take questions.
Margarita, thank you so much. I'm so glad that this is recorded because that was a lot of information. So before we go to questions, I just can you just let everybody know how they can get a hold of you to check out the other services that you offer? And also, do you maybe want to do like a very just quick roundup of your course that's coming up?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So I do have a course coming up, a 3-month container. It's the Astrology of Love. It starts on the 17th of February. It's my favorite course to teach. So for those who have been with me, you know what it's like. We go not only into astrology, but into beautiful activations. We learn about attachment styles. We learn about love languages. We do meditations around the inner child, and yeah, it's just really deep work around relating and healing our relating and understanding the way that we relate. So whether you're single, attached, or somewhere in between, it's good stuff. Then I'll be leading a Sacred Feminine Moon Retreat in Durban in May. I'll be doing a day workshop in February in Hot Bay. For anybody who wants to, it's in Cape Town. Also working with Venus energy, so it's really like understanding your love and relationship archetype and her shadow and how she expresses herself and how you express love and how you need to be loved. So I do a lot of work around natal readings, birth readings, predictive readings, astrocartography, wherever you want to live in the world, but also a lot of relationship work. And I may then also be leading a retreat in Zanzibar in June. So I think that's it.
Amazing. Yeah? Thank you so much. We will make sure
Yeah.
that we send out your contact details with the video. Okay, so let's go to questions quickly. So somebody asked, what is the financial / job / income situation for Pisces, please?
Okay, so these questions are super relevant. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on them because otherwise I'll go into a full reading. Okay, but for Pisces, I'm a Pisces moon and rising, so I know this answer. Look, we would have to look at your whole chart because I wouldn't know just from your sun sign. In a very general sense, Saturn and Neptune will be moving into your income sector when they move into Aries, which can be very good for consolidating your resources, investing, restructuring your resources, earning money through things like creativity, art, music. But you do have to have your feet on the ground. It has to be any visions that you have need to be really pulled down financially so that you don't end up dissolving your finances. Finances might feel a little bit tighter. but it can also bring a lot more stability. It's like maybe not the roller coaster as much anymore. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to stop it there.
Cool.
I can also recommend that you look at Astrolator's Year Ahead for Pisces. She does a 3 hour video where she'll go more deeply into that. Yeah.
Great. Would this be a good time for a Libra ascendant native to delve into esoteric and occult subjects professionally?
Professionally, so Libra, Aries, Cancer, it really, really depends. Jupiter is going to be coming into your professional sector when he enters Cancer. So it can be very good to expand in general. It really depends where, where your moon is and how is that connected to your career area. And I'm just trying to think what's in your ninth house. I would say for now, study until June, study the subjects that you want to study, because there's a good chance that once you graduate in the middle of June, once Jupiter's moved into your career area, you can actually take what you've learned and give it to the world. So these next 6 months are good for studies.
Great. And then what is the financial slash job slash income situation for Gemini?
So Gemini, oh yeah, it should be pretty good. Once Jupiter moves into Cancer, he moves into your money house. So it should activate your money sector, which, if your money sector is being activated, it's got to be good on the career side of things. So again, very, very generalized. You have to look at your whole chart, but the Jupiter is going to potentially help your finances.
Amazing. That's it. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thanks so much, Margarita, for all your insightful information. And we'll see everybody soon at the next talk. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being
Bye.
here. Lots of love. See you all soon. Bye.